Ladies and gentlemen, independent Americans around the country, around the world, and especially inside Ukraine. This is a moment we've been waiting for. A returning champion is back to join us, one of the most popular guests of all time, one of our most frequent guests of all time, and one of the most timely guests every time. The great and powerful Malcolm Nance, aka Nostradamus, returns to independent Americans. Welcome back, my friend.
Well, I'm glad to be here. Wow, it actually has been a while, hasn't it?
The
Well,
last time you were here, well, on the show here,
yeah,
was March. I looked at it, it was March 4th.
I can't remember anything.
Yeah.
This has been a pretty long war. So let me see, March, that was like last year, right? No, it's some time ago.
You
But
had you had just come back from Ukraine and you were kind
yeah,
of
yeah, I was going to join the Legion.
you were doing what Malcolm does, which is kind of tell us what was coming without telling us what was coming.
Yeah.
And it's really good to see you, man. It's really good to see
Uh,
you. It's good to see you alive. It's good to see you well. We got a lot to talk about over the war so far and the war to come. You are very much deep in it, more than ever before. But let me start with a question that I ask of everyone that's maybe more important now than ever before. Where are you, Malcolm, and how are you?
well, I'm in a secure facility in Ukraine. So, and I'm doing very well. I'm off the line. I'm off the front line, where I've been for since June, almost full time. And I know I came back to the States for like 12 days to do a book tour that I had to do contractually. And I've been on the line ever since. And then I was on the pointy end of the line and then beyond the line. So, but now I'm back. We're going through a training and rearm, regroup, refuel, refresh, evolution. As you know, people cannot stay in, near, around active combat all the time. So, even these hardcore guys that we're with here, they've got to go and take leave. They've got to do family matters, and they've just got to take a mental health break.
Mm. Your perspective is so unique and so valuable, and I want to get into all of it. When you say you're well, you haven't been wounded, you're alive.
Oh,
You got
it's not for
right,
lack of trying.
right.
I'm telling you, yeah, the Russians, they've got this thing. So, but I've been blessed. I've got guardian angels, and we haven't been as fortunate in the Legion battalions. We've recently taken several casualties. We just had three. We passed on a single instance. So, this is a war, and I want people to understand that, people watch television and they think that they're going to get entertained. And for every day of those Russian statistics, there's hundreds and hundreds of Ukrainian men, women, and children who are dying in this war. And, people say they get war weary really quick. Well, look, you've got an option. These people here don't care. These people here have no option. They would like to have, their reporters standing in the middle of hurricanes, right, getting hit by tree branches, rather than being killed out on the battlefield.
That perspective is so important. I want to talk about the Legion, which you have been instrumental in fueling and creating. You kind of tipped it a bit last time you were on the show, but take us to, for folks that are outside of this, that have been watching hurricanes, that are watching Aaron Judge, right, or maybe watching snippets or pieces of this. What is the front lines like? Can you explain what the front lines are like in 2022 in this war for Ukraine's survival?
Well, I'm not going to reveal any trade secrets. I'm certainly not going to reveal anything that's operational security. So for those of you who are just dying, waiting with a pen, that's not going to happen. And you've seen it there, but you cannot see the dimension of it when you watch it through a television screen. It's like watching through a postage stamp. The areas that we occupy now, or we have reoccupied, the territory we've liberated. And let me tell you something. There's nothing more satisfying than actually liberating people who were oppressed and who were threatened with death every day, whose homes were being looted, women and children were being raped. That's real. This is not something people make up for propaganda. You don't have to make it up. The Russians have said it themselves. We have audio recordings of, women saying you can rape women, just wear a condom. It's a really horrific war. And because the level of intensity of this war is not being brought to you on a minute-to-minute scale like it was at times at, the kickoff to Desert Storm, or, we're sort of more like Afghanistan 2007, where people couldn't even remember we were in the war, and occasionally you get casualty reports. But for those who are fighting and living in it, it's a very horrible thing. But Ukraine is a unique country. I mean, it's a beautiful country. When I was here in the pre-war, I kept thinking, how is this not a tourist paradise? I mean, it's just really, lakes and rivers and, old babushkas that can curse you or bless you, depending on what you do to them, all these things. And then we find that the line is really just an area of control that extends from where Russia's furthest artillery can reach, which is the rear, usually about 40 kilometers, of somewhere around 25 miles, and then going deeper in. So, you have sort of a rear that gets hit from time to time. The city of Kharkiv, where we are, it was surrounded on three sides earlier this year. And the Russians were going to take it, but it's a city of 1 million people. And the Russians calculated that, well, these people speak Russian, not Ukrainian, therefore they're going to side with us. Well, when you bombard someone's house, they're not going to side with you. These are the most rabid, loyal Ukrainians. They just happen to speak Russian dialect instead of Ukrainian dialect. And so you have these urban areas, which were 20-story apartment complexes and dachas and little food plots and small villages along beautiful rivers and lakes. And you go to them rigged out, right? You got your full battle rattle, you got your helmet, armor, everything, by the way, let me tell you about the level of intensity of combat here. We don't carry the regular combat load, right? Which is, 6 mags for the most part, minimum of 10 magazines, minimum. There's no combat resupply. A drone dog isn't going to march up and drop off 2 cans of ammo, right? We have to hump that ourselves, and we hump a lot of ammo. I was the leader of a what we call a Delta unit, a combat support element. That's drones, mortars, logistics, and intelligence, field intelligence. And we're the last squad in the, in the squadron, the little element, platoon level special forces element that we're in. But we're also the tail gunners, right? Try turning around and sweeping your rear when you got 2 cans of heavy machine gun ammo. That's your responsibility. You have your own weapon. You have massive amount of ammunition. It's very, people don't understand how hot combat is. All right, it's hot. I drip. I have to wear a do-rag just to keep the water out of my face. You go through your Camelback, drink all of your water in an instant, finding water bottles and hoarding water. We have to bring that with us too. So all of these things, but I'm wearing all this stuff. And then I go through this beautiful little village. And you're like, oh, this is really cute. It's got hedges. And it's like, some of the places we refer to as Hobbiton, right? It's like the Shire. You're like, oh, this is beautiful. Look at how these flowers they planted, and they have all these hedges. And then you look, you realize the whole village is abandoned. Every window is shattered. Half these buildings are on fire. And they got this grid, right? They know where we are. The Russian artillery has that because that's why the buildings are on fire. And you're like, okay, this isn't fun anymore. And now you're moving with purpose. And the purpose is to see, is there an ambush team there? Have IEDs, improvised explosive devices, been left for you? Is anybody or if you're going to link up with somebody, do they have wounded? Do they have food? Do they have water? We generally where food is not something you're thinking about most of the time till way later, like on day 2, right? So all of these factors are going in there, and you're still thinking, wow, that's really nice curtains these people put in this house. This house has been hit by a thermobaric rocket and it's on fire and the brick is melting. So, it's a very different world. It literally is like, if the cutest little village in the Berkshires, right, had main battle tanks and combat infantry rolling through them in shootings, War of the World style.
Malcolm, you're doing a great job of painting the picture with a writer's eye. And I think that's why your perspective is so valuable, so unique. You're one of the most high profile people in this conflict, right? You've got a global media presence. And I think that's been important to shine a light on there. And I'm sure as an asset to the Ukrainian side, I want to ask a couple of questions about the fight that I feel like are underreported or misunderstood or not understood at all. Can you describe the enemy? Because I think that right now we've got this idea of the orcs, right? They're being kind of stereotyped, and the Ukrainians have been very effective, I think, in their information warfare and the communications. But as someone who's been in direct contact with Iraqis and Afghans and Iranians, you've talked about that in multiple appearances on the show.
Right.
Tell us about the enemy. And I know it's got various levels and types, but tell us about the Russian enemy that you're fighting and what you think folks need to know.
Yeah, especially since we've taken captives, right, and I help process captives, and you're like, let me put it this way. This is where Americans' racism comes to fore, because they see different people as other, right? The brown people and everything. And I remember the first guy that we took, who was I won't tell you where he's from, but he was Russian. And my first thought was, this guy looks like the paint guy at the Walmart, right, in upstate New York. This guy should be like on aisle 23 at Lowe's. And he's just a skinny, scrawny kid, right, who's got nasty pants. Okay, I'm going to tell you something very interesting about the Russians that is true. It is not a stereotype. They are pigs. They live like pigs. Wait, let me take that back. I won't say I have never. I have seen conditions like they're living in groups of people who have a complete and utter disregard for who they are, where they are, and their cleanliness. Let me tell you, in the modern battlefield with Muslim forces, working with our Muslim allies and against Muslim terrorists, they're clean. They wash 5 times a day. They have to do ablutions before they pray, right? They clean out under their nails. They wash up to their elbows. If they don't have water, they will use raw sand and sand off the upper epithelium. They have cultural differences. Yes, they don't have, depending on where you're at, if you're out in the real field, like in some place way out in Kunar province or, or in the mountains in Abbottabad, you're going to see generally very different culture. These guys, the culture that I see here, it would be like if, and no offense, Idaho were suddenly at war because it's closer to what I saw in Sarajevo when I was in Bosnia, right? As I used to say, when I was in Bosnia, which was interesting because we were actually looking for foreign fighters there, right? Iranians, Arab jihadists, things like that. I said, Bosnia is one of those places where before the war kicked off, it was white Christians that didn't go to church and white Muslims that didn't go to mosque. And they all drank Slivovitz, right? Every Friday night and Saturday night. That I'm like, what's confusing here is that I have Europeans going at each other, and that hasn't happened since 1945. Right here, that's exactly what's happening here.
So Malcolm, I want to put a point on this because I think it's a really important insight. Is that due to the low quality of soldier on the Russian front line, the lack of discipline, the lack of military order, or is it something else? But it sounds to me like, these are the sorts of things you see in a ragtag army that's thrown together without a strong culture and a strong esprit de corps. And as a related question, evaluate their fighting spirit, because I think we've seen this almost mythical ethos and morale of the Ukrainian side. But in those folks you're in direct contact with, you've captured, you've killed, describe their fighting spirit or their lack of.
Yeah. The Russian combatant. It's okay. Again, these are not, manufactured images. And you're seeing very few Russians, because the only Russians you're seeing are dead ones. And you're seeing mobilized ones. And that's pretty much all there is, right? On occasion, you'll see a civilian, you'll see a captive. And we try not, the reason you don't see Russian captives is violation of the Geneva Convention. And the guys that are putting those videos up are like the soldiers who, at the moment of capture, who have their GoPros out. And that's very hard to control on the battlefield. But I've now been at the point where I can evaluate the Russians based on their combat skill. And there are two categories of Russian here. The elite forces, the VDV, who, the mercenaries of PMC Wagner. Some of these guys have a lot of experience, but they also get the best weapons, okay? The best weapons. But I have literally eaten the lunch of the VDV and the Spetsnaz in one of their command posts that we took. And their lunch was there, right? Their MREs, by the way, are way better than the average Russian soldier's MREs. A different packaging, really neat. Looks like somebody went to a camping food store and stuffed it. Same lame crackers, but, and not enough coffee, Russia. Get on with that. But the rest of the army, there's guys that don't want to be here. They don't know where they are, and they don't know why they're here, and they're just getting their asses handed to them. When we say the mythological fighting spirit of the Ukrainians, that isn't myth at all. These guys, okay, first at the beginning of the war, we called it, the screaming Cossack, right? These guys were like, the only way that the Ukrainians would attack was, they would twirl their mustache and swirl them, the sword over their head and go screaming into battle and start lopping off heads. And they took a lot of casualties with that strategy. But you have to understand, pre-war, I think I told you, I know I did on MSNBC, I met the top two battle commanders who are now running this war. Right. General Syrskyi, who was at that time commander of land warfare. Now he is going to be stepping up possibly in General Zelensky's job as commander of the armed forces of Ukraine. And General Pavlyuk, who is commander of Donetsk, a Donbass area, the joint forces area, who is now commander of land warfare. These guys were like swapping out jobs when one guy would get burned out, right? Pavlyuk went up and took army, and Syrskyi came down and took Central Front, right? Central Command. And these guys, I said this on MSNBC, these two guys can't be beat. I saw that in February, early February, before the war ever started. And I was like, whoa, I've never seen commanders like this. This is Patton level stuff. Like, when the shooting starts, they're going to go, let's go. You bought it on?
Can I pause you there? Because there's so much to pull apart here, Malcolm. Sure. And I love it when we get going, man. We could make this a 4-hour podcast, right? But I also know you got sleep to get and fighting to do. God, but there was one part of your last appearance on this show in March. Yeah. You and I had a pretty lengthy discussion about how in March we saw that Ukraine could win this. Not just defend the cities, but win, right? And now we're seeing.
I got trashed.
Yeah,
I got trashed.
A lot of us did. Yeah, a lot of us did, right? And I think, I talked to Tavis Smiley about this on his show last week. He asked me how we knew, and I said some of us have expertise that other people don't have. And I want to know now. It's like the third quarter, right? And this team is winning, and the momentum is shifted, and the whole world can see it. And I'm going to ask you, how far can they take this? Are they going to stop at the Russian border? Are they going to pursue Putin, or where is it going to go?
Well, they've already stopped at the Russian border in many places. I mean, but let me give you an analogy that people our age can understand. This is Harlem Globetrotters versus the Capitol, the Washington Center. What was the name of the group that the Globetrotters always played?
The Washington Generals, maybe? I don't
Washington Generals or something. Yeah. And it's just like, this is, let's take it, for example, this offensive we just
Right.
did, which I was on the tippy spear point of, through the grace of God. And that video that I made, which is very popular in Russia this last week, the things had moved so fast, and you'll understand this. Artillery moved up to our forward positions, and we were way ahead. We were like, why is that artillery here? They're supposed to be 20 kilometers behind us, because objectives that were going to take days were taken in hours. And the Ukrainians are so skilled at understanding that they couldn't use any of the old doctrine for this. They had been handed a series of defeats in 2014 and 2015, cost them 14,000 men from 2014 to 2022, and they learn lessons. They study war. They work with U.S. advisors. They work with, the War College in the United States. I'm sure they have their own computer, mapping out the battle on the data on the battlefield. But the one factor that the Russians don't have is that these people want to fight. They are desperate to fight. They want to fight the Russians. They want to prove themselves, to kick these people out of their country and cleanse them. And when you're talking about that, that's not esprit de corps. Esprit de corps is the love of the organization. What we have in the Legion, why we stick together, is esprit de corps, right? But when we're on the battlefield, all right, what we're showing can only be, how can I describe it best? All right. Bringing it. We're bringing
heart. It's
we are
heart,
bringing
guts. Yeah.
this war to you.
Yeah,
and
heart. Yeah.
I said this tonight. They enjoy it when they go on the attack. Oh, they want to be on the attack. This is the old saying, right? They're not attacking the people in front of them who they hate. They're attacking and they're fighting for the people behind them whom they love. These guys have women and children and families that are, they don't want to see a funeral here, or just, there was a video the other day that was heartbreaking. Everyone knows I'm a widower. So, but there was a video of women who were widows and widowers receiving medals posthumously from President Zelensky. And every one of them was in tears. And it was like Zelensky wasn't there. And this medal was worthless to them. But they showed up for the love of the country. And it broke my heart, because I thought, I've stood there. I've stood in that moment where the world just feels empty and you don't care about anything. And the medal, they take the medal and they turn and they walk away. No words, and Zelensky has to do that every day. This war is not a war where one side is just decisively whipping the other side and causing routes. The routes come from the sacrifice of the men and women who go to the tippy point and find that the enemy has a vote too. The enemy has weapons. The artillery is what's causing all of our casualties. We rarely have a gunshot casualty, but they occur depending on where you are.
That's important for people to hear too. I mean, that shapes the picture of the battlefield. Malcolm, you were an early, you guys in the Navy probably call it plank owner of the Legion. Right? When this first got stood up, Zelensky first issued the call to international veterans to join the fight. You were, texting me behind the scenes. We had another guest on here, Seth Harp, who said, "Hey, it's not really real." And
it doesn't exist, right?
Right. And I said, well, I'm getting conflicting information about that. But it was in the works, and now we've seen it. 2 Americans we know were captured and have recently been released after being, sounds like, tortured and held for over 100 days. Can you give us what's your no shit analysis of the Legion? How effective it's been, what it looks like, and what's the call to arms going forward? There are a lot of folks who are maybe still on the sidelines who are like, this looks like a pivotal point. Maybe now I'm available. I wasn't before. Is as almost a recruiter in chief here, is the Legion still hiring, and what do you need?
Oh yeah, well, the Legion is definitely still hiring. Because a lot of people who were plank owners, right? What we call the, week 1 Legionnaires, the guys who got here in mid-March, like when the training base was struck by cruise missiles. And just 3 guys I'm working with today were survivors of that attack. And I mean, they were in the barracks that got blown up. They were like blown out of their beds and things like that. That was a very different time. No one knew what to really do. Guys were putting it together. Battalions were forming all over this country. And it took months and months of pain and to do that. At one point, the Legion was in a fixed position where they weren't doing anything. And apparently, to people, they go, oh, we're not doing anything. Yeah, you're doing something. You're holding the line so that the Russians don't come through and knock down the eastern flank of the city. And they go, oh, okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You have to explain it to soldiers sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But now with this offensive, they're on the attack. And we got a lot of legionnaires who had left that have returned. The Legion has two elements. There's an infantry battalion, which is 1st Battalion, and then there's a Special Forces battalion, which has stood up since summer, which carries out special reconnaissance missions and direct attack missions and things like that. And I put it this way: it's less special forces, more special operations, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't have 10 years of training and all that, but the missions still require. The missions are exactly what a U.S. Special Forces ODA would carry out. And there's several types here. You have the Ukrainian Special Operations Command, the Special Police Units, the SBUs, like FBI's, has their own special mission units. And, we work synergistically with, the Ukrainian Special Forces, the Alpha units that they have. And we, for the offensive, we were in a very large formation with dozens of missions that were being carried out simultaneously. Some missions, not a shot is fired because you're not going, if you shoot, bad things will happen, right? It's just, there are places you don't want to be found.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to be found because there's no Black Hawks coming for you. There's no helicopter that will zoom in and, helocast you and fly you out. When you're behind the lines, you're there. And the Russians are all around you. So, but then there are those missions where, we've had 8-10 hour gun battles. I mean, straight up Black Hawk down type stuff, where the most important element were the guys who had to run back to the pickups and, grab belt-fed machine gun ammo or more frags or 40 millimeter and things like that. We don't have the luxuries of American war fighting. What's happening here is pure World War II, Battle of the Ardennes style warfare, where tanks come at you with dismounted infantry and shoot at you, right? Or then they just call in that artillery that they have. Russia's advantage in that is now withered and it's gone. And back to the Nostradamus part of my theme early on, you might recall that when I made my speech on April 18th, where I announced on Joy Reid's show that I had left MSNBC and I had joined the Legion. I left news media to join the Legion. And at the end of my speech, most people don't remember this, I made a personal request that no one knew about. The Ministry of Defense didn't know I was going to do it. Joy didn't know I was going to do it. And I said, I have a note for President Biden. We need the high mobility multiple rocket launch system and the multiple rocket launch system.
Yep.
And I said, it was the first, I'm going to tell you, it was the first time Himars and MLRS had been even mentioned. In Ukrainian
Well, so
war.
I'm glad you brought that up because we talked about it last episode with Joe Cirencioni. I've been highlighting it, and now Biden just doubled the numbers sent. I think he sent 4 more this week. He keeps pouring them on, right? And it seems like the Himars have been a game changer, right? I mean, I know the sports analogies are not fitting. We said like the Himars have been like an Aaron Judge on this battlefield in the last. Can you tell us from your perspective? We heard it from from a strategic perspective, from almost an academic perspective from Joe. What have the Himars meant for you guys on the ground?
Oh, Jesus. Oh, game changer. And I knew it. When they got the first 2, right? People could feel that something was going on the battlefield. By the time we got to like ammo dump number 10 blowing up, and I operate at the brigade level as well as the tactical level. So there are assets allocated to you on the strength of your priorities. We didn't have priority for a very long while, but we did have M777 artillery. But when these things come, Himars was used as a surgeon's scalpel to cut out all Russian artillery supplies. You can't kill every artillery piece, every gun, every launcher. You can't. There's just too many of them. You would have to use cluster munitions over a broad area. Himars is a scalpel. It's like those computerized open heart scalpels, right? Where the guy's there and arms come down and cut open the chest. And all you really want to do is nick a vein, right? And it will change the entire dynamic of this person's health. That's what Himars is, only it's the opposite effect. When we aim at something and they bloat it up, it will get blown up. It will not survive whatever is going on. I mean, the Antonovsky Bridge, all of the ammo dumps, let me tell you, Ukraine now has some capability with this, and they went about it smart. Like when Desert Storm happened, for example, a lot of people don't realize the reason that the Iraqis surrendered in 100 hours is because we starved them for a month. No trucks were allowed into Kuwait, no food. We targeted fuel trucks and water trucks, right? Because guys in the desert need water. Well, in Ukraine, artillery, food trucks, convoys. I think they even held back on tanks for a little bit. And it was just like, they can't shoot guns if they don't have shells. So what's the best way to get rid of the shells? We go after the trucks? No. We're going to blow up every intermediate and front ammo dump we have. Where are those? Well, here, and here. There's still little old ladies that live near these things. And, there's loyalists all over the country. And there's I'd like to give a big shout out to National Geospatial Intelligence Agency for, I don't know for a fact whether we're using any of that stuff, but I've been around.
Malcolm, it's like, watching from the outside, to see, the Himars on the battlefield, it seems to have a game-changing effect, similar to what we saw with IEDs. Right, like IEDs in the Iraq and Afghanistan, especially in Iraq, kind of changed the tempo, got inside people's heads. Were really like one of the pivotal weapons of the battlefield, and the Himars, however you say it, seem to be doing that. Let me ask you, you're great at what's next. If you could talk to Biden right now, if you could talk to the American people, you're going back in the front lines. What do you need?
Well, see, I always put a caveat on this because I know everything that's coming over here is being used. If anybody tells you there's a giant Indiana Jones warehouse full of stuff that's not being used, they're liars. Liars. I saw a news clip. I want to say, well, let's go back a few weeks ago, where somebody had taken a video near the Polish border of the MRAP. Right, the mine-resistant armored personnel carriers, and within a day or two, I mean, these things are rolling. They're not on tank flatbed carriers; they're on their wheels and rolling. Within a couple of days, I saw them. I was like, "Hey, I just saw those on YouTube." Yeah, they go right to the front. And, I think when I saw them there, they didn't have weapons on them. And then when I saw them, it was clearly the same truck convoy. They had stopped. They had mounted weapons. These things go right to the front. The Ukrainians use and exhaust these weapons right away. Everything we send to Ukraine are consumables, okay? There is nothing that is being stockpiled. So when artillery comes, it goes to a unit, it gets allocated, that stuff gets blown off, and hopefully the next shipment is there, and they go through these logistic cycles. They're very good at their logistics here. And granted, we're giving them stuff, but these guys don't have Booz Allen Hamilton or Lockheed Martin or major defense contractors with tens of thousands of civilian truckers coming in here. This is taken by the Army. Their logistics command pass it over, and they prioritize where they really need every round.
Malcolm, can I ask you to, as someone who's been highly critical of the military-industrial complex and the role of contractors in our American post 9/11 war, this is, I hope, a quick question: is the way they do it better? Does it work better?
Yeah, this is Desert Storm level logistics. In Desert Storm, I'm going to give you two examples. In Desert Storm, when I needed a bandage, I went to a Army, what we call a CASH now, right? Combat Surgical Hospital, what was a MASH. And these people were all MASH reservists, Vietnam veterans. There had been like 10,000 years of medical experience in this MASH. And I actually wrote a note in my pocket, please take me to such and such MASH at, Custer Naval Base or Roscalea Naval Base. Take me only to these guys. But when I wanted a bandage, the U.S. Army would provide me a case of 50, right? There's actually a book written about this. The logistics of Desert Storm were all handled by the U.S. Army and the Army Logistics Command, and was staffed almost principally by soldiers and U.S. Army civilians. When I went to Iraq in 2003, all right, I tried that same thing. I went to a U.S. Army unit and I said, hey, you guys got any, TQs? Any tourniquets? Got any bandages? And they were like, I showed them an Israeli bandage. They didn't know what it was. It was so new. No, I'm sorry. I showed them a cravat from an old old set. And they were like, well, we don't have that. We only have these Israeli bandages and they're only for us. And I was like, whoa, well, don't you have a logistics tail? Same thing with food. We had within days in Kuwait in 1991, we had tea rations. We had tray first line rations being brought out and cooked with hot water by Army personnel using Army food trucks, or was allocated to us. I remember when those Hungry Man ready meals already pre-cooked showed up. It was heaven. This war, I couldn't get an extra MRE out of a soldier. What's happening here in Ukraine is closer to Desert Storm than the modern. You have to wait for the logistics contractor to bring you the food, and they've hired a local, and they go to the dining facility and they swap it out. No. Well,
it's all.
I go to the supermarket for my food if I have.
It's all one team, right? Instead of a Frankenstein's monster of people with different interests.
We should go back to the old model.
Yeah, Malcolm, I want to let you go, but one thing you asked me to mention, I want to make sure we get time for is you're doing a fundraiser. Can you talk about that and how people can help?
Sure. Yeah. So at 3rd Battalion Legion, we're the newest battalion. We don't get the same allocations. I've mentioned this before. People say, why are you guys raising money? Why? What is this? The Rough Riders in the Spanish-American War. You're going to form your own regiment. It's not like that. We are regular line infantry or special operations units attached to a line brigade, which is now on the attack and has been on the attack for some time now, since these offensives have kicked off. And now the Russian line is collapsing. However, this has been a privately owned vehicle war since day one. If you want mobility beyond the basic capability that you're given, which could be a 5-ton truck, and you won't see that 5-ton truck for days because it's off doing other priorities, then you're going to walk. Well, people don't walk. The Ukrainians went home, bought their cars, and people are running around, I'm not joking, on the battlefield in sedans, right? Some of them quite interestingly camouflaged. So, but we learned very quickly in the world that I'm in. I actually made this proposal for the Special Operations Battalion in early March before I became a Legionnaire to one of the Deputy Ministers of Defense. 20-man teams, special operations teams running around in 5 technicals. And so we've managed to, through donors like Rip Rawlings of Ripley's Heroes. Ripley's Heroes has been incredible for the Legion. They gave us a bunch of cars. Our newest one, because we lost one to enemy fire, and he goes, I got one coming here for you. James Vasquez is going to bring it right out there. They camouflage it. It's all Gucci. It's with us right now. But we need more vehicles. And the kind of vehicles we need are real technicals with gun mounts. We rock M240B, machine guns, well, I wouldn't call them heavy machine guns, but heavy machine guns. And they need to have a pintle mount put on it. And that needs
they're heavy they're heavy if you have to carry them. I've had to carry them.
Oh my God. And we do carry them. I mean, some guys like the MG3 or the German machine gun or the PKM.
So you guys, we'll post a link and encourage folks to support in whatever way they can. And let me ask you this:
tapestry.org, which is my think tank.
Say it again, Malcolm.
Tapestry, TAPSTRI.org.
And I'll link to it also in the show notes, wherever you're listening to this podcast, folks. Malcolm, let me just ask you, before I came in here, my kids are home from school today for Yom Kippur. And I told them, I was like, guys, this is a big conversation. And they said, yeah, it's your friend at the war, right, Daddy? And I said, yes. This is, and my little boys are tracking on Ukraine. They know where you are, and we're not forgetting in this household, and I think among many of us in the country. Just as a closing thought, and I hope you'll join us again, and I'm so happy you took this time. What do you think people need to know? If they only listen to one snippet of this interview, Malcolm Nance is a decorated American, a guy who we've trusted in the media for a lot of perspective and analysis. There aren't too many guys like you over there. I just want to emphasize that too. Who can communicate this experience and have the profile that you do. What do you think Americans need to know right now about this?
Well, let me caution you a couple of things. For those of you who think that I'm tweeting about this, if you actually go through my timeline, I think I have 6 tweets in the last 9 months with pictures of me. I think a couple of pictures, one video, 2 videos. The Russians tweet more about me than I tweet about.
And they did. They had you on their national television, and they
like
held you up
a week, every show for a week, nonstop. Because I'm the black guy who's NATO. Me. Yeah. But if there was one thing that I want you to impart, and it goes to this raising funds, because we need to buy sat phones, we need to buy new vehicles and things like that. Everything that you do has real impact. Whether you're protesting, those guys who are out protesting at the Russian embassy in DC by putting pictures of NAFO, right? The slightly, what do they say, slightly brain damaged cartoon dogs, of which I have a character. I'm an early guy into NAFO. But everything you do, all of your support really matters. And the most important support that matters is that you understand this is the Eastern Wall of democracy. And in less than a month, you have a choice to decide whether the Western Wall of democracy crumbles, all right, into dictatorship by giving the Republicans the House of Representatives, by being apathetic or lazy or feeling like someone else is going to vote and you're going to take care of it. I'm working this month with Democrats abroad, right? I love going around with Americans who live overseas. When I lived overseas in the United Arab Emirates, I was a big DA fan. I did voter registration in Paris. They really pulled out hundreds and hundreds of thousands of votes in 2020. I mean, just like the greatest voting period of people overseas in American history. Well, you've got that opportunity too, because this wall here in the East will collapse if all of the funding stops. You see Marjorie Taylor Greene, all these other morons out there who are saying Zelensky is a corrupt Nazi, dictator. And we're like, you live on another planet, okay? Zelensky's the president you all wish you had. It's young Joe Biden. So, and Biden's doing great. He's giving us everything that we need. We don't get support by the people who know that it's going okay, who know that the economy is good, who know that if they don't come out and take their family out and their friends out in a month, this will all go away.
Malcolm, can I ask you to put the Nostradamus hat on one last time here as we wrap it up? How does this end? How does this end if I bring you back on in 6 months? And again, I know there are multiple scenarios, and we've talked to Joe Cerancione about the nuke options that are at Putin's disposal from, a
Well,
test all the way up. But how does this end? And to include, you have a reasonable understanding of inside of Russia as well. What do you see unfolding inside Russia, in the weeks and months to come?
if you have time, go find the video clip of me where I speak from a site and I talk at the Davos Economic Forum. They had 4 Ukrainian soldiers. I represented the Legion. And somebody asked me that. They go, put your Nance hat on. What's going to happen? And I whipped out a wild one, right? But based on what I was seeing, what I was feeling from the ground, I said Russian combat power will collapse in September. They will not be able to withstand an offensive. They will not be able to withstand us. They will break in September. And they were like, whoa, I think this was June. And I just felt it. And then, when we started seeing things move on the Ukrainian side, even Russian bloggers were seeing it, I kept thinking, this isn't going to be a slugfest. This is going to be a sledgehammer against a pane of glass, very thin glass, because the Russians have no agency here. They have no reason to be here. They don't want to be here. And, when it's Himars o'clock and we precision destroy everything you value, all of your most sophisticated bases, all of your command posts, and then tanks show up by the hundreds, and you don't have anything, you barely have food. They just abandoned everything wholesale and ran for their lives. Unfortunately, 2 unfortunate Russians who were in an observation post got overrun so quickly. Instead of surrendering, they jumped into someone's stolen Lada, literally, and tried to run. And, the first 2 that I had seen that were killed were just freshly killed on the side of the road, just a few minutes before. And we were like, you could have surrendered. And now you'd be eating, shawarma with us and, having a cup of tea, and your war would be over and your mother would be fine. So what's next? I'm going to make a very fundamental, simple statement that I made, I believe it was February 18th-ish on MSNBC when I was on with Chris Jansen. And then 2 days after the war started, Ukraine is going to win this war. They are winning this war. They have been winning this war since the first few weeks of the war. Russia just presented themselves as a target. And when I say win, I'm going to say exactly what I've said on air before. We will kick the Russians out of the 2 provinces they stole in 2014, Donetsk, Luhansk. I haven't checked my watch. They may already have collapsed. I know most of Kherson province has collapsed in the last day, and the Russians are now trapped. As many as 25,000 men may have to surrender or be given, a little leeway to run without any of their heavy weapons or even their rifles. Zaporizhia will be next. And if you watch Denis Danilov on YouTube, who's my favorite analyst because he's Ukrainian, he's here. He uses a very dynamic map that's very accurate. Nothing looks good for Russia. We're already clearing up to the Russian border and all these places that a few weeks ago were solidly Russian. They may find that their dream of Donetsk, Luhansk, and even Crimea is within reach. The only question is, I'm sure you talked about this with Joe Cirincione, is what level of madness will the Russians reach for? Chem bio? Will they whip out a chemical weapon? Will they whip out biological weapons? There's something we haven't seen in mass. Will suddenly, cholera break out in Kharkiv in tens of thousands of people simultaneously after an airburst shell goes up? The Russians have this capability. If they use a nuclear weapon, I'm sure Joe mentioned this, it goes to Russia. It will literally fall back over your children. And you wouldn't even imagine the wildness of the Cossacks at that point. At that point, old grandpas who are older than me, and I'm pretty old. I'm 61. I'm the oldest guy in the Legion. will get, go out and get their skinning knives for deer hunting, and it'll be literally wild Cossack time.
Mm. Well, you're definitely representing well for 61-year-olds. For New
I hump
York,
my ammo, baby. I hump my 2 ammo cans. Even some young guys, I've had to pick up their cans for them.
You're representing for our home state of New York. You're representing for America. You're representing for Ukraine and for freedom. And you've been, a towering inspiration. And at a time when I think we're looking for leadership and we're looking for people who are willing to walk the walk. There aren't too many people who put down, a TV gig and a cushy life and go fight a war, and you doing it. And I think it's really important. And I'm grateful that you keep joining us on the show. I hope next time we talk, Putin is gone. And that's my prediction, is I think it could happen a lot faster than people think. He could be dead. He could be captured. He could be running. And I hope that we're celebrating that moment when you get on the show again, if not sooner, my friend.
Well, when the 1-year anniversary comes, I hope to be home, and I hope the overwhelming majority of this country, I really feel the overwhelming majority of Ukraine will be liberated. And if you guys can help us, tapestry.org, please make a donation. We have an enormous number of satellite phones we have to get, and we don't buy Red Bull with it. We use our own money for Red Bull.
If you need Red Bull at 61, you drink it, man. And until then,
sometimes it's our only meal.
You know what?
Not joking.
Well, then I'm going to get you a case of Red Bull. Until then, my friend,
I never want to see it again.
Thank you for all you're doing. Please let the guys out and gals out there know that we've got their back. I know you'll stay vigilant more than anybody we've had on this show. And Slava Ukraine.
Hoream Slava.
Thank you, my friend.
Okay.